Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. At Communitech, we're working hard to bring you business as virtual as much as possible while also supporting our members the best we can. Before we kick things off, I would first like to take a moment and thank all of our courageous frontline workers for everything they are doing for our community right now. My name is Christina Wood, Director of Start and Scale Programs at Communitech, and I'm very excited to have Chad McCaffrey and Mo Kerbeck join us today for a look at revenue operations. Before I turn it over to Mo and Chad to get started, I just have a few housekeeping items that I wanted to review with all of you. So just a reminder that this session is being recorded so that companies can refer back to it at a later date, or if they weren't able to jump on the call today, they'll have a chance to watch it. So these recordings are on our Tech Talks page at communitech.ca, and that's where you'll find all of our Ask Me Anything sessions. You also may want to minimize your speaker view on the right-hand side of your screen in order to view the whole slide presentation that we have for today. We are also going to be sharing these slides out after the session. I also ask that you keep your microphone on mute during this session, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. So you can do that using the chat functionality. And as always, if you're interested in connecting with any of our growth coaches, including Chad, who's on the call today, please connect with your Communitech advisor or CSM, and we can make those connections for you. Mo is also available to connect with through LinkedIn. And lastly, Communitech is running a series of Ask Me Anything sessions every Tuesday at 2. And so on this slide, you will see a list of all of our upcoming sessions scheduled for the rest of June and early July. So with that, I think we'll get started. So thanks again, everyone, for joining the call today. I will share my screen here. Just give me 1 second. Chad, can you just confirm for me that you're able to see that okay?
Yeah, all good.
So these are the, sorry about that. These are the 4 topic areas that we'll be covering off in today's session. So obviously our overview of what is revenue operations, and then diving into a Q&A with Chad and Mo on the remaining 4 topics. So to kick things off, Chad, can you tell us a little bit about what is revenue operations?
Yes, for sure. Thanks, Christina. Thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. So to start off, let's set a definition straight. So I think a lot of people, I know Mo and I have run into this a lot, think revenue operations is just a part of the operations team. Many people think operations team, you know, HR, finance, and sort of a team that sits on that side. So really, we're talking about a new world of revenue operations. A lot of this has been driven from the new world of subscription software, where you have a constant need to support the customer, ideally for a long period of time. So to define it for you, it's the alignment of marketing, sales, and customer operations across the full customer lifecycle to drive growth and operational efficiency. This is a holistic approach. So you're seeing the rise of chief revenue officers, you're seeing the rise of customer success. These are new terms and new things. We need a new operating model. So we're going to walk through the new operating model for you guys today. I'm really excited about that. So for everyone on the call, there may be folks that wanted to highlight this slide. You may be a business that's e-commerce, very digitally focused in your model, all the way to the other side. You can see on the slide here, the very high where it's an enterprise sale, right? And everything in between. So just wanted to set this up properly. As we're going through this, we're going to touch on many of the different types of models, right? But just so you think about it, it's going to be different. If you are an e-commerce business, a marketplace, something that's very digitally and tech touch only versus an enterprise sale that may have a very large team, resource heavy team that's supporting it. Great, and I just wanted to highlight this slide as well. So this is really a lot, this really emphasizes the structure of what we're talking about. When we're going to talk about tools today, we're going to talk about the technology stack, we're going to talk about a lot of the different elements. It's getting more and more complex by the day. This is, again, why the revenue operations function, if you look at the high growth businesses today, they have this as a standalone function for a reason. You have to understand how buyers are going to process and come through the entire business model that you create. So this is an example that really shows the complexity we're dealing with, right? And why we need a team to focus on it. So yeah, if we want to jump in, Christina, to the questions, we can get started.
Okay, so the first topic that we'll hit is revenue engine design and GTM strategy, so go-to-market strategy. So what are the key areas to consider when designing my revenue engine?
Yeah, so this one starts with the financial model first and foremost, right? So we're thinking about a calendar year. We've done some planning, hopefully. What are we trying to achieve, right? So if we're trying to add $1 million in revenue, we need to start there as we're starting our design process. What are we trying to do? As we move down from there, think about the segments. So segmentation is really important. What customers are we trying to get? People in SMB? Are we going at the enterprise again? Who are our customers, and how are we going to go and get them? From there, you're going to think about coverage, right? I think about it as coverage. So as a leader, what coverage do we need in terms of a pipeline as we get into the process as our next stage? We'll talk about this, but what does that coverage need to look like? How much capacity do I need in my engine in order to achieve these results? Okay, so that's the next one. Compensation, quotas, right? If we have a sales team, we need to think about how we're going to compensate that team. What goals do they need to attain? We need to set proper metrics. We need to set baselines. We need to understand the inputs of activity and effort that need to happen in our engine in order to, again, achieve those results. So again, we're going to touch on these as well, but we need to make sure we're thinking about that. Territory design and channel strategy, I want to touch on as well. So again, where are you focused on geographically? Are you focused on North America? Are you focused on all over the world? Does that matter to you? How are you going to set up territories for your teams accordingly? These things all matter as part of the revenue operations and the engine as we're thinking about the strategy. And then finally, I would highlight pricing and packaging. Always evolving, very important though. Again, if you have someone showing up on your website, they're going to see transparent pricing, they're making a decision. That's one side of it. And then we need to equip our team. If we have a sales team that's working with CIOs selling $1 million software deals, pricing, again, negotiating, all of these things need to be thought about as it relates to our operations. And again, the engine that we are building as a company. So in summary, quickly on this one, I think about it a lot as this is our business. The revenue engine is what the business is. We're supporting customers, we're serving customers, and we're generating revenue doing so. So this is a really key thing to start with. We need to start there before we start to build into the other layers.
Did you want to add anything there, Mo?
No, that was pretty nail on the head. That's pretty good.
How do I approach resource planning and identifying hiring needs?
Yeah, so this again, we really need to understand a capacity model. And for those that need some help on this, we can work through this. But again, what is the financial model of the business, right? If we're trying to grow, again, usually thinking about a calendar period, so 12 months, we're trying to go from A to B. What does that look like? And now let's work that backwards. So we're going to work backwards from a top line growth number into what we think the team that's required to make this happen. So this is going to be thought about again through the entire life cycle. So let's use a SaaS business example, an SMB focused SaaS business, let's say, okay? So we have an inside selling organization. Let's say we have 5 sales reps. We need to understand how many leads that they need in order to create their quota, to achieve those goals, right? So we think about on the marketing side of the house, what is that? What are those requirements, right? It might be an outbound sales development team that's going to supplement that as well, which is where opportunities or pipeline is going to be generated, okay? From there, our sales reps can only manage so many deals throughout a quarter or a month, right? So we need to understand exactly how many deals they can manage, what that capacity looks like. So that'll tell us how many sales reps we need to hire, right? Then as we get into the customer side of the equation, we're going to look at account management. We're going to, again, we're a light touch here. So it's going to be a larger number per representative on our team that can manage that. But we need to do this math. This is math. We need to start from the financial model. We have to work down into the capacity that we require as a team, which is going to tell us what resources we are going to need and going to give us that roadmap to go and hire those folks and make our system, again, really functional and really tight.
So switching gears a little bit into the next topic area, so process engineering and enablement, I'll turn it over to Mo to answer the first question. Okay, I have a strategy and I put up a bunch of Oh, I should have taken my own advice and minimized the review. Okay, I have a strategy and I put up a bunch of job postings. Now what?
Okay, so I think once we've worked through the math, as Chad has put it, right, and we understand how we're going to be going to market, right, when we transition to start setting this foundations to scale this thing out, right, the most important thing that we need to do is turn the GTM strategy into two very discernible things, right? One of them is it's a process that aligns everyone to a consistent cadence of execution, basically. So there's a set of clear expectations for every role that we've hired for, right, and they're repeatable across any deal, right? And then there's the piece where we enable them in order to actually be able to execute on this. So this is the piece where we're going to touch on this as we go forward, but it's about making sure that everyone's well equipped to basically address their job role.
How do I approach process design?
Sure. So yeah, at the very start, really at the very heart of it, you basically put together a planning session with your team, right? And this is both on the revenue, on the product side of the equation. And we need to map out how our buyer is going to engage with us, right? So that turns into a set of discernible stages that I think many people have heard the term customer journey being thrown around, right? To those, we need to be executing on specific things internally to make sure that we're aiding the customer to actually convert all the way down the funnel, right? This turns into basically a standardized glossary or basically a handbook that we can use on a go-forward basis and repeat time and time again. For each phase of those stages, we need to make sure that someone actually owns them, that there's a clear line of accountability, right? And that there's a KPI that's aligned with it. That way we ensure that nothing really drops out of the funnel. In areas where we are handing off from one person to the other, that ambiguity is cleared up by a set of clear definitions, right? And we can proceed forward and scale our acquisition at the top of the funnel and make sure that it's going to be effective at the bottom end.
One thing I would add to that is a lot of times we see documentation as a big gap. People aren't taking the time, and this can start on a whiteboard, getting the cross collaboration. Again, back to their definition of revenue operations, this is about a holistic view of the customer and buyer experience. That's expected in 2020. So even just getting with your team across these areas, yes, we know that we have different functions. They may be small to start with and they grow, but you need to have this cross-functional view. Start it on a whiteboard, talk it through. How is a buyer going to come to our website? How is a buyer going to engage with our outbound team? How are they then going to be moved into our sales process, right? As Mo's mentioned, these need to be very clear and they need to be written down. So it can start in a flow chart or a whiteboard, but it needs to be moved down into something that everybody that gets hired, everybody that is a part of the team buys into and agrees upon. That's the only way that we can get this tight and fit as a system. And so a lot of times what we see is people it's not written down, it's in people's heads, it's in different documents. There isn't a clear, this is the process that we're following and how we're going to measure things, which we're going to get to. But fundamentally, we have to start here. Once the strategy is clear, we have to get it process-driven documentation done. That then is going to now fit into how we think about the technology and how we think about our reporting. So it's a vital piece.
Chad, I'm not sure if you cover this later on, but who inside of the company should be involved in nailing down this process?
It has to be straight from everyone. The leadership team, it depends on the makeup of the team again, and this will differ again by business model. So you may have a head of growth in an e-commerce situation that's more holistically looking at marketing and the acquisition funnel, right? You step into a more sales-driven approach, you may have a VP of sales, you may have a VP of marketing. You have to bring these folks together, right? End of the day, it's a buyer journey, especially in a recurring revenue model. For those that have a renewal happening, this is a continuous thing that never ends. Right. So it's a figure eight is the way I think about it. And so it's even more important that you sit down and you really map through how long if someone signs up today, how are they going to stay with us for 5 years? Right. How are we going to continue that process and have consistency in it? So everyone that focuses on the customer side of the equation, I like to think about it that way. If you touch a customer, if you're engaged with a customer digitally or through any conversation, you need to be in that session. And that has to be the CEO included as well to drive this and be included and involved.
What do I need to enable my team and make sure that they can execute?
So I think there's two ways to basically think about this, right? There is, there are two sides to enablement, really, right? There's the internal, right, which is simply for company use, and then there's the external, which is more customer facing. Right? From the internal perspective, you're basically trying to help your people understand the process and what their roles are in it, right? So it starts all the way from onboarding, right? Making sure that everyone is lined up to ramp up very quickly and actually start executing on their job, right? And then the other piece is playbooks or SOPs that can act as a point of reference for everyone to be aligned on the definitions of what our customer lifecycle looks like, right? And what stages exist and what actions we're supposed to take. And that's one end of it. The other piece is internal reference points, where we look at things like battle cards, for example, or call scripts or what have you, things that enable people to reference to do their jobs. And then there's the external side to the equation, and that's also it's also documents and collateral, but they're more customer facing. So we want to start thinking about, at some point, if I'm an enterprise sale, we're going to need pitch decks, right? Or if we're trying to reduce uncertainty over buying, we're going to need specific case studies or white papers that speak to our value prop. So it's all about the external side of it is things that we can put in front of the customer to aid them into their journey towards close and post-close.
Yeah, and just to add to this as well, I think, the internal, external is really important to think about. So internally, there is a lot of different ways you can think about onboarding. The onboarding is a key way to think about it. Sales enablement, the term product marketing gets thrown around a lot too. We have new cycles of product that ideally are happening with frequency. So there has to be a rollout strategy. How do we enable the sales, the customer efforts accordingly? So you have to think about this as product management through to the market. And so there's content to create. There might be a tweak to the sales deck. There might be new benefits and value points that we can bring into the picture, right? So the internal side of it is all about getting your team up to speed, making sure that they're equipped, right? They're aiming, but we're arming them as well. We're arming them with what they need. And then an external piece, can't be forgotten, but on the website, the case studies, the real storyline around value, the social proof, these things are hugely important in order to get that repeatability and drive the growth that we're looking to drive.
It's hard to tie process and enablement to work to hard metrics. How do I account for these in my KPIs?
So this kind of ties back to what we were talking about with who owns the maintenance of the enablement process. So once we've aggregated our tribal knowledge, basically, if you will, into a set of standardized documentation, some things kind of unfold from that, right? There are customer-facing actions that directly roll up into a goal, right? And then there are other pieces that are supporting, if you will, that are not as easy or they're not as black and white to measure. Right. So there are a lot of management methodologies to use this, like OKRs, for example, is one of them. It's almost like mapping everything to a bigger picture and making sure that everything fits in, and we can tie things to timelines and what have you. There's a project management approach to this as well, which is, like delivering X by specific deadlines according to time of need. But I think the idea is here, more than anything, always keep an eye on those specific pieces, because they tend to get lost in favor of more hard metrics, if you will.
And just from a leadership perspective too, you want before and after on this one, right? So as you're setting up new initiatives or new projects, enablement, these types of things, they seem fluffy to some, and they really should not be. This is so imperative, right? It's not just about, hey, you're a talented salesperson, go sell stuff. We're trying to build repeatability. We're trying to build a system that everyone can be accountable to and support. And so before and after you do this initiative, we build a new battle card, we build a new competitive strategy, whatever it may be. Let's measure. Let's look at, here's before, here's after. We're improving our win rates. We're improving our ability to capture new customers quicker. Our sales cycle is going down. There's many ways that we can look at a new process, a new enablement package, whatever it may be. We can see how all of that is hitting our results and hitting our outputs. And so we need to think about it the same way, and let's tie that into our KPIs and make sure that people own it.
Awesome. So moving into the next topic area, tech stack, tools, and systems. Chad, I'm wondering if you can tell me, how do I determine what technology and tools I need How do I prioritize changes now that my team is remote?
Yeah, so all this ties into remote. I know Mo and I were chatting about this. We chatted about quite a bit, but this done well, revenue operations done well, allows your team to be anywhere they need to be, right? Things are measured, the impact's clear. I don't care if you need to take, breaks in the day. Like this whole new culture of remote, revenue operations is the foundation to be able to do it. So just wanted to highlight that first, right? When we come back to the tools we actually need, it's very stage dependent, right? Comes down to, how much can I spend on tools? And we, again, back to the truth of the financial model. But if we come back to the initial slide we talked about, right? If you're, again, let's use e-commerce example, you're a tech touch business, you're a low touch business in the middle, or you're a high touch business, right? In terms of your engagement with the customer, that is what's going to drive your decision-making around tools, right? Naturally you're going to need, if you do have a sales engineer, a solution architect, you have a very heavy enterprise sale, your CRM, which I know is a question we'll get to, you'll make decisions specific to the collaboration that's required on given opportunities, right? So you're going to have a more evolved, probably a more deep technology stack based on the type of motion or type of system that you're creating, right? Naturally, if you're an e-commerce sort of Shopify store and doing quick transactional type things, much more marketing side stuff, a lot less required on the customer, let's say success side. You might only have a support tool. Everything kind of changes based on those three types of business models, right? So, we can go through some examples as we go, but like that's really how I think about determining as a baseline what tool set I need and I need to get my team engaged with in order to properly do their job.
And so obviously things have changed with teams working from remote. How does that change the priorities?
Yeah, in my view, this is really a leadership question too, and just how you think about it as you're managing your team. But you have to be bottom up these days. We have to give people the collaboration nowadays with Slack, with when we're talking about collaboration on deals, right? Sales enablement stuff, having all of this open, Google Drive, properly structuring our enablement and our tools so that people have what they need. They can collaborate with their colleagues. As a clear example, I really love deal rooms in Slack. I use a tool called Troops. .ai for this. So essentially every time an opportunity or a sales cycle is happening, we can create a deal room to collaborate as a team. You can have the CEO in it. You can have different people from product and engineering team. You can have true collaboration around the business that we're pursuing. And so that's a one way to think about it. But I think your priorities are fairly similar, right? As a sales organization in 2020, whether someone's sitting in an office beside you or they're on the road meeting a customer, I think the dynamic is the same. I think you still need to think about your tools for either situation. And ideally you should have, using modern cloud tools and things that are available to us today, we should have an ability to run our team in either situation.
Perfect. What are examples of tools that I should be thinking about?
Yeah, there's a lot of them these days. It's funny because this question comes up so much, right? I mean, you look at the marketing side tools, there's the marketing 5,000, which is well known. This is 5,000 software applications for marketing. It's incredible, right? Sales is getting up there. Sales is probably into the 2,000 now, just for the sales team, and then you talk about support and customer side. It's very ambiguous and very tricky. So how do you make these decisions, right? So I can just walk through, some of the examples. I think if we start on the marketing side of the house, right? There's definitely, I think these ones are imperative to think about. Like we don't have to go in every direction, but I think, thinking about contact data, account data, right? These things are really important. Who are my customers, right? We talked about this earlier, geographically, firmographically, what size am I, where am I going? What's my direction? How am I getting those accounts and contacts into my team's hands, right? That's the database. So that allows us to market to them, to talk to them, to get them engaged. That's part one. Marketing automation comes up a lot, right? Different ways to think about this, but as you're getting to if you're a bigger business focusing on the enterprise on a bigger sale, you may have a Marketo, you may have a HubSpot, that's powered on your website. It's actually doing nurture campaigns. It's actually capturing, a lot of that sort of side of things for you in the analytics of marketing before it makes its way to sales. So that's one way we think about. I want to mention one in sales productivity of really Atrium is a newer one that I really like. It's into the sales productivity. A lot of the metrics we're going to get to in a little bit. We'll talk about how those are captured. This is vital, right? Activity, email, calls. How are we understanding the activity, the inputs that our team's doing? That sales productivity stuff is really big. Troops AI, I already mentioned. I had on that list as well. So we'll link to all these for everyone afterwards if you want to check them out. Sales engagement, outbound teams, right? So your outreach, sales loft are your two big ones. That's a system that your sales development group, many call them, right, are making outbound effort. So they are emailing, they're using LinkedIn, they're using various channels to engage buyers directly from an outbound perspective, more of a push model. These systems allow us to not only drive the activity that's happening, what the messages are, how we orchestrate it, but it's also going to tie into our CRM and allow us to track it. So it's going to allow us to know reply rates and all these great things now around, is this working, right? So those are a couple to think about if you're thinking about an outbound strategy. I'm naturally getting to CRM. We're going to talk about that. There's various ones, lightweight, more heavier stuff. Again, very dependent on your model. Sales forecasting. A lot of people will layer in as we talk about reporting. We'll touch on this, but your Clarys, your Insight Squared, just giving you that much more visibility into your future pipeline, the risks. How can we understand deals are going to close? We all care about that. That's the name of the game. So thinking about that is important. Conversation intelligence is another one to bring up. This is a newer one, but really important. I find it just as a game changer. Two main ones I would reference is Chorus.ai and Gong, Gong.io. These plug into your Zoom, your Google Meet, however your team is interacting with customers. It's going to record those calls, allow you to coach your team, allow you to take things back to the product team as feedback. Really awesome to have those calls captured with the customer for both those purposes. So those are two that I would check out. Moving into sales enablement, we've talked about it a bit, but collaboration, a good Dropbox setup, a good Google Drive setup will get you a long way these days, right? But there is others, Showpad, depending on how your team operates. Again, if you need to operate in the field and you need stuff on iPads, you have a different dynamic, you might look at some other tools. But fundamentally, we want to be able to organize and structure our sales content and collateral in one place that is across the buyer journey, right? So as a sales rep, I don't need to think, I'm dropping into a discovery call. Here's my structure. I'm dropping into, a demo. Great. Do we have recorded demos? Do we have, online stuff? How are we doing this stuff? So thinking about where that's housed and how that is being used by the team, you can go as lightweight as Trello and other things for this, but the reality is, get it organized. It's vital. It's a key piece. And then lastly, we just talk about the customer success support side. So a lot of options here, right? You have the lightweight from, Intercom and Front and Zendesks of the world, if you're thinking more of a support type of a model, up to Tangos and Gainsights and others that are actually about full account management, full customer success management. And again, this is going to be dependent on what does your team need to do. And yeah, so those are a few to touch on. Just want to rip through those for everyone, just food for thought. We'll share links and stuff, but those are a number of tools you can think about and should be thinking about as it relates to setting up your engine.
And Chad, is there, I'm curious if there's a minimum, if I want to implement revenue operations into my business, what's the bare minimum that I should be looking at with respect to tools?
Yeah, so the main two I would say, and Mo, feel free to jump in and add, I think to keep it super simple, you need a CRM, right? That could be as simple as literally Google Sheet version all the way up to, a fully implemented modern Salesforce instance, right? Depending on your needs. That's a requirement these days. There's too many moving pieces. You got too many channels and things going on, right? Point two, I would say, is your Google Drive, your Dropbox, your cloud environment for all your documents, and keeping a well-documented, especially as it relates to your revenue operations, a well-documented process and the collateral we discussed, right? Those are the two main things you need. A lot of the other stuff can be done manually, right? We can email one-offs, but as we're building the system up, as we're getting more integrated, we want to start thinking about layering in those other items I mentioned.
Right, makes sense. Mo, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that list?
Yeah, absolutely. So to that point, the CRM is essentially the central nervous system to your piece. So nail on the head there. And obviously the collaboration piece is important. The other thing to think about is you go back to your targets and you think of what is it that I need to do in order to enable my team to execute on this. So if there's a bottleneck to reaching those targets that you can't just you can't throw people at the problem, or you shouldn't throw people at the problem, that tool kind of moves up in the priority, right? So that could be, to Chad's point, a sales loft or an outreach from a sales engagement perspective. It could be a marketing automation tool. Whichever it may be, the tool is really there to solve a bottleneck for you.
Right.
That moves up in priority fairly quickly, depending on where you are to target.
Right. So would it be fair to say that you look at where the bottlenecks are in your process and then look for the corresponding tool that can help you solve that and build as you go?
Yeah. Yeah, let's be clear. It's not all about tools. I know I rhymed off a bunch there. That's all food for thought. The reason we just went through our today's session in order is for a reason, right? Strategy and process come before tools, right? That's manually do this. That's talk to buyers. That's understand, let's really understand before we start to integrate. And we, see this a ton. We want to get so integrated and go tool heavy right away. That's not the way to do it. We need to make sure it's buttoned up. Let's make sure we have a process that we all agree on and that's clear and that's designed for the buyer, not for us, right? And from there, we can properly set up the flows and the structure using the tools. And that order is very important to highlight.
Makes sense. So I know I need a CRM, as we just discussed. How do I figure out the one that suits me best?
Yeah, this is really dependent on initially your team. It's founder-led selling initially, right? If you're a small team, that can be done in a structured Google Sheet, right? Like we can do this out of a spreadsheet to start with, and then it's going to evolve. So to me, it comes down to when you're making that step into scaling, right? We need a foundation. And this is where we always see people trip up. We think that people are just going to, as founders, there's a lot of skills there to get things off the ground, right? As you hire people in, you can't expect them to do the same thing, right? So as you make that step, right, into call it scaling, you're going to have to make a step into a bigger, more structured CRM, right? Typically, we see the path of, you'll start with the spreadsheet, start with something lightweight like that, just to get things moving. Then it'll move into, a Pipedrive or a HubSpot, something that's like a lighter weight. I can at least get some stages set up. I can at least sort of get a semblance of a sales process baked in, start to manage it. Then you get to the next stage. Naturally, you're going to hit a wall. And we see this all the time, right? So you're going to hit a wall where, whoa, I just don't have visibility in anything we talked about, right? Like now I have a bunch of reps now on the team. The team's evolved. Who's doing what? I can't see who's accountable for what, and things start to fall apart. They literally just fall apart. So that's where naturally it moves to Salesforce. Salesforce is the main discussion around CRM for many reasons. There's arguments about this, but the truth of the matter is that for the structure that is required for the analytics, for the tracking, for the other tools we just talked about, we need that central nervous system. That today is Salesforce 99% of the time for companies as they get to that point, right? That's where outreach and sales off and these other things that we want to do and these other functions are going to allow us to integrate and are going to allow us to tie into that central nervous system. So the evolution goes really in that path for most. That's what we see. And so again, depending on how quickly or how do you have resources internally? Do you have people that have experience with Salesforce? It does have some more administrative needs. It does have some more setup needs. So you have to be ready for that. But if you are ready for it, whether you have experience with it or you have someone in your team, we tend to see that you can get through a lot of headaches if you do kind of make a jump. And that's, a timing thing for you as the business and your financing and where you want to go from a growth perspective. But that's the typical path. And then we make decisions around that.
So getting now into the last topic area, insights reporting, data-driven management. Mo, I now have a strategy process and I have set up the systems to enable execution. What insights and reporting visibility do I need?
At the base of it, it's basically what you need. It's basically exactly what it is that you need to manage your business, right? And that to make that a bit more granular, right? You need continuous metrics to basically answer in a group of major themes, right? For one, what you're trying to find out is, have I reached the point of product market fit? Right? Am I priced and packaged and positioned the right way, right? And then the other piece is, do I have enough by way of customer engagement or activity across the funnel to actually deliver on the targets that I have for the next 12, 24, 18, 24 months? Right? Is the process set up to actually deliver, right, on these things? Or are there bottlenecks that I need to be mindful of, right? Are my teams and my employees effective at actually, right? And then the last piece, and this is one that often gets ignored, is the data that I'm acquiring from all the systems that I have actually an accurate reflection of what's going on? And that's kind of what you need to look at when you look at your insights. There's two dimensions to this, right? There's the KPI or the performance analytics side. Right? And then there's a data quality monitoring side of it. right? And basically, as long as it's something that's actionable to you, right? As long as it's something that you can take and translate into an action, make sure that you prioritize answering in the 4 themes that we discussed.
Mm-hmm.
My team is now entirely remote. What KPIs or metrics would you recommend that I track for each role?
Yeah, so if you want to jump to the figure there, yeah, that would be great. Thanks. So this one gets talked about a lot, and we just talked about marketing, we talked about sales, we talked about a lot of different aspects of the customer journey. But for this example, I just here's 3 main roles we could think about. Okay. So from if you have a sales development team, that team, we tend to see it, right? We're going outbound, people don't know who we are. So we're leveraging an SDR team. Inputs to outputs, and I like to talk about efficiency and quality metrics too. So there's examples, we'll share these slides afterwards for you guys, right? But we just to talk them through. So on the sales development side, this is where we mentioned with outreach or with sales after we set up an initial system, but these are the things we're tracking. How much email, right? How many emails, how much volume is going out? We're sending out emails to people. Ideally, those are good emails. They need to be, especially today, right? So there's a quality quantity matrix here. So emails, calls, unique contacts. How many contacts are we adding in to the system, right? That's a key thing that a team does. They're going to take those contacts that we talked about before out of the database. They're going to add, let's say 20 a day. Here's 20 people that fit my buyer profile. Great. We're working against those. We're touching those customers. We're ideally getting some engagement, right? Unique accounts in a similar way. So accounts and contacts tied there. How many new accounts, right? And new contacts. So those are some ideas around the input metrics that we would track, and we can talk about how we do that in a little bit. On the output side, what are you trying to do with that activity, right? You're getting meetings. You're getting meetings created. You're getting opportunities created or pipeline created, right? You're sourcing bookings. So end of the day, straight to the bookings of closed revenue through this team, right? Those things all need to be tracked. And then finally, moving over to more of the efficiency and quality stuff. Nowadays with these systems, we can look at email responsiveness. Are people replying? I like to look at reply rates, right? As a main thing. You could send out a whack load of emails. If no one's replying, no one's talking to you, that's not a good thing. So we really want to look at how much volume is getting engagement and replies. The amount of touches, all that sort of stuff. So I won't speak through all of them there, right? Then we move into the account executive side. So again, once we get into our pipeline, how many opportunities does that rep own in the CRM, right? How many deals? The pipe own tied to that dollars wise, right? The new opportunities that have been created in that given week or that given period, maybe it's a month, right? How many meetings? Meetings is a key one for me. I like to see the world in this reference around quality conversations, right? That's a metric I think about. So ideally if it's a sales development rep, it's just anyone on the page here, anyone that's engaging with the customer, if they're having a quality conversation, how many of those do we have this week externally, right? I tend to see if you have 5 a week, just generally speaking, if you had 5 quality conversations a week that really drove next steps in some way or another, you're in a good place as a rep, right? If you did 3, maybe next week you do 7, it tends to be a good barometer towards this, right? So there's some more examples there. Obviously as a sales rep, as an AE, we're getting bookings, right? We're looking at monthly, how's the pipeline going from open to close, win rates. We can get more scientific these days. We can look at how long should a sales cycle take, right? Are things stuck? Based on the stages and our process again, this is where this comes from, right? So bring this back up to that level. The reason we have a process and we have stages of engagement is for these reasons, because now we're going to be able to know, okay, well, this one's stuck in demo for some reason. It's not moving into proposal, as an example. What's happening here? We can properly assess and inspect, which drives forecasts and drives our reporting, right? So these are key. These are some ideas for you guys to think about. Again, happy to go into these. There's a bunch of ways you can, based on your model, that we could orchestrate this. But these are the key ones we tend to see across inputs, then that outputs that are driven by those individuals, and then some of those efficiency or quality metrics, right? That would tend to be missed. I find that the third column there tends to be missed by most. We tend to have an idea of activity, a little bit, and that'll ideally get us some meetings and some revenue, but we don't look at the quality. And I would push you guys to think about those quality and a bit more efficiency metrics as you can, and try and instrument those so that you can really build on top of that.
How do we effectively use the dashboards and reports we've built in?
Okay. Question. So at the heart of it, really, like The point of these dashboards and reports are to basically enable two things, right? It enables day-to-day management, right, of your teams and your staff, right, and decision making on a strategic level, right? That's fundamentally what these dashboards are supposed to be there for. So you really start by only building what you will be using on it to either support decisions or to manage your business on a day-to-day basis. So for example, like, you know, at the heart of it, you should be able to have like a waterfall view of your funnel to identify whether your marketing qualified leads are turning into sales qualified opportunities or close won deals. Based on that, you should be able to adjust things about your marketing strategy. What's working? Should I pour more money into this? What's not working? Should I pivot this to that? Right? It's that's the kind of cadence that you want to have on a decision-making level, right? From an individual management perspective, you need to, you know, Chad covered quite a bit of this, right? In terms of, you know, how is my team performing? Are they actually executing? Is the effort there, right? What is this effort turning into, right? And what are the blockers that I can remove? What are the blockers that I can remove for them, right? So another example on this color, if you see a lot of deals stuck into the demo phase, right, on your pipeline management dashboard, that's probably a good cue for you to start attending a couple of demo calls and understanding from a qualitative perspective, what is it that you can fix for someone, right, or on a team-wide basis, right, to make sure that these ops become unstuck. But that's fundamentally what it is. Pair it with cadences or meetings, right? So pair this dashboard with, I am going to use this dashboard for this purpose and at this time, right? And if you can't find a purpose and a time for it, then you're probably not going to use it.
And just to add to that quickly, you know, the reason for these visualizations or setting up these reports, it takes work, right? This is the work of this team. This is why it's important. We create these visualizations so they can be consumed, right? There's communication here, as Mo mentioned, right? So I think the operating rhythm, and this is where we really see the supports needed, right? You tend to have a sales leader that's doing a lot of, or a revenue leader that's doing a lot of stuff in our businesses. For many on the call, you probably feel this, right? Someone's carrying a lot of different things. They don't have time. Like, it's very difficult to do both, right? You have to move from qualitatively managing a customer and trying to get the deals moving and done and support your team. And then you have this quantitative side that has to be the rhythm of reporting, right? And that's where we see the need to plug in, even if it's one person or getting support for this. And so think about it as distribution and consumption as well. So once you visualize or have some reports, to Mo's point, make sure they matter and they're don't have stuff that doesn't matter to people in there, but then distribute it and make sure it's consumed, communicate it, right? There's great ways to do this now. It doesn't have to be a meeting too. You can, you know, share it out in Slack. You can record a Loom video across it. You can talk about it and make sure people are just feeling that cadence. They know. One thing I would suggest that I really liked is at the end of a given month, always have a clear report from this conversation come out like by the 10th of the following month, right? Everyone knows that it's coming. So we're June the 9th today. So perfect. Tomorrow would be May's report, right? So May finishes, we have our funnel, we know what we're trying to do, we're buttoned up. We know that June 10th, the report's going to go out to everybody. It's going to go up to the CEO. It's going to get spread across the organization, and we're going to have our plan to what we actually did. And so you create accountability through this and that alone. So that's just an idea for you guys, but literally just doing that and implementing that is going to make a big change in your business, and people are going to be more accountable for their effort and their inputs to making things happen. And then you can make adjustments based on these things. It's not just about, oh, I'm on the dashboard again, you know, like you want to avoid that at all costs. Make it about real clarity and make it about everyone getting better. If you bring those things into your culture, you're gonna see things really start to go for you in the right direction.
Yeah, I was gonna ask on that note, you know, how quickly should you be making changes or pivots based on the information you're seeing on the dashboard? Should you wait until after that communication goes out the following month? Should you be, you know, more proactive than that? Should you be waiting, you know, a quarter to make changes? Any thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. So it kind of depends. I would break that up into like the individual side of it. So you have an individual where you're seeing, I think, leading indicators. There's definitely coaching discussions, right? One-on-ones. This is all very known and vital stuff, right? So if you see stuff there, that's a little bit, I think, quicker feedback loop. You can, you know, what's happening here? You know, is everything all right? You know, we have a clear understanding that this is the job, right? This is the effort and we've thought this through as a team. There's that discussion, which I think is a little bit quicker. What's trickier is moving it up to process changes or moving it up to a higher level. So we've put in a new process, we've put in a new methodology, we've put in a new, you know, system, and this all takes a lot of effort and time for all of us. How quick should we change that? my take is, I mean, you need to give it at least a sales cycle, and that's the tricky part. So again, depending on your business, you could have a quicker transactional sales cycle. That feedback loop's pretty tight. You may have an enterprise sale that takes 12 months. It's a little bit harder. That said, if we look back up through the funnel, again, why we do any of this work is that we can look at those leading indicators within the process, right? We start to see things, oh, okay, like we're not yielding, we're not getting the opportunities we thought, let's dig in here, right? And we can make some adjustments or pivots. Like the troubleshooting, I think, doesn't have to be a complete redesign again, right? It can be a bit of an iteration, right? Let's talk this through. And I think like anything else, it's about collaboration with the team. It's about that open culture. And that's where, for me, like the gong chorus comments I made earlier, like actually having calls within the journey recorded and coachable is such a key part. And you can do this manually. Again, it doesn't have to be about tools. Like literally just record your Zoom session. You have a discovery call. Here's a great discovery call. These are very good questions. This is a good engagement with the prospect. Great. There's that on the shelf for someone to look at. Similar with a demo, similar with a pricing proposal call, similar with the negotiation, right? So if we can start to capture this stuff earlier, we can make adjustments. But I think fundamentally, if you're making a big process change or you're integrating a new process, you need to give it whatever you deem your sales cycle to get a full understanding of if it's working or if it's not. And you look for your red flags, but I think you need to give it that time. That's the hard part.
Okay. How do I maintain data quality? I'll turn that over to you, Mo.
Yeah, so I think at the heart of it, right, like everything that we've just talked about building is not going to matter if we're some of the automated data is being transformed the wrong way, right? Or if someone's not inputting, if a group of people are not inputting their data, none of this is going to matter at the end of the day, right? It's going to influence the reliability of your dashboards. It's going to influence how they get used or how they get adopted, right? And at the end of it, we've basically built this well-oiled machine that's just sitting there at the bottom. The trick with data quality is that it's two things. One, it's a living thing, so it's continuous, right? It's a figure eight, to Chad's point from earlier, right? And the other piece is that you need everyone's buy-in, right? And you need accountability around it, right? A lot of people centralize data quality to one department or one function, right? When in reality, actually, if you think of all the customer-facing touch points, right? Everyone's in a way responsible for how data quality looks, right? So we need to, for one, facilitate their buy-in by showing them how this benefits them, right? And it's creating that culture that is excited to be able to get insights, to be able to do our job better. The other piece is to hold every individual or team accountable to their end, right? It's almost like a social contract, if you will, right? We will configure this for you, and we will help you drive insights that help you do your job better, as long as you give us the fuel to do so, right? And those are really the two pieces. As long as we know that data quality is a priority for this organization because we need it to make the right decisions, and that everyone's accountable for it across the customer lifecycle, the job of data quality doesn't become centralized. Really, it becomes a cross-functional thing where the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, it has to come from culture. Mo mentioned that. This is, all the times like, oh, my reps aren't filling this out or this. Everyone deals with this. This is a struggle. That's why it's a great question. I think the reality is the culture of the business has to be around growing performance. It has to be around us getting better. It has to be okay to not, to fail and show a call that didn't go well. And it's a cultural thing. You have to be open and transparent. This is easier said than done, right? Especially in sales, like it's, the type of people that are carrying a quota, and it's a scarcity thing. It's like, I don't want to share that. But the best reps I've ever worked with in my career, they're very forward about things. They're coaches. They're talking about what worked, what didn't work. This didn't work well, or this fell down. So I think the more that you bring coaching to the table as a group in your meetings, your transparency and the communication in Slack or other tools, like that's how you want to think about it. And then, the mandate of data quality, this is a business level initiative. This is a company thing, right? Our data quality across product, across everything is what we're talking about today. This is the business. It's the engine, right? And so the data piece needs to be just so known to everybody, and that's what's going to drive the performance and allow us to get better and better. And as soon as everyone sees that, it really starts to work well, but it's getting there. That's the challenge.
So before I turn it over to the audience to see if you have any questions, so if you do and you want to ask them here, please put them into the chat, and I will moderate them with Chad and Mo to get them answered. As I mentioned, if we're not able to get to your question today and you'd like to connect with Chad for a one-on-one conversation, please reach out to your Communitech advisor or CSM, and they can definitely get you connected, or feel free to connect with Mo through LinkedIn. Are there any last thoughts, gentlemen, before we wrap things up for today that you'd like to share with the group?
No, I think in summary, I would say, we hope we've demystified this a bit for you guys. We find that this is definitely a bit of a nebulous topic for many. It's, sales operations, marketing, what is all of this, right? So just in summary on that, really the game now is evolved to a much more cross-functional thing. That's inherently creating more complexity in the tools and everything we went through today. So we hope this provided some great insight for you guys and how you can think about it that way and how you can manage it more as a centralized engine for your business. And yeah, we're happy to connect anytime and talk about this in more detail.
Well, we're giving people just a minute to put any of their questions into chat. I'm curious, with the quality management of the data that you're putting in, at what point can you really start pulling out reliable insights from that data? Like, do you have to wait a while to be able to start making inferences, or what should companies expect as far as turnaround time?
Yeah. I would start with, so now I start with benchmarks, Christina, right? There's really good benchmark data out there. So again, pending your sales cycle and what your business is, look at what's out there. Talk to your peers, right? What are their reps doing in quota, right? Maybe they're a step ahead of you. I always like to talk to companies that are just maybe one leg ahead in the journey, right? So they have reps, and the reps are doing $500,000 in quota. Okay. There's a similar sales cycle here. There's a similar approach to the market here. You can start to lay the foundation back to those input metrics and stuff we talked about. So you take it individual up to the company level. I think you sit down as a leadership team or a group, and you think that through. Put the thought into it. Spend the time. Do the planning. Right now, you're going to have an understanding, and then you go test it. And yes, again, that's going to take a sales cycle. It's going to take this quarter. This rep is, if you're an SMB, it could be a month, right? 1 month, how does this funnel move, right? Do we have, if we're working this many deals and opportunities up top, how many are coming through throughput? How many are closing? Start to get some patterns. So again, if your sales cycle is longer, it's going to take you a bit longer, shorter. But I would say, look at the benchmarks, set up a plan and a capacity model that is justifiable, right? Is, conservative enough. It's not like out to lunch, right? That's the hard part. I want to grow this much. What's that going to take? Start from that. Look at the benchmarks. Talk to your peers. Now test it and iterate. There's enough data out there nowadays to get a good starting point from that perspective, and then you're going to be able to iterate on getting those numbers better and better as you go.
We do have one question from Anthony. Any tips to filter out flaky proposal requests?
Flaky proposal requests. I guess I would wonder, just to maybe clarify a bit, are we talking about people coming to proposals like to us as a business, or are we talking about our team sending out flaky proposals, just to understand that a bit better?
Yeah, so Anthony, thank you for the response. Clients who are not serious. So
okay, sorry. Yeah, so we're talking about, we're in a sales cycle with a customer or prospect, and they are just not engaging with us. Yeah, I think that comes up to upfront questions, right? And just that's sales stuff. So really getting clear with them on what are your priorities, and asking hard questions, right? Around timeline, and just digging in with them. Like any sale, you need a mutual plan is the way I would answer that. So if they're going to do a mutual plan with you, Anthony, meaning here's when we want this live, right? Here's when we want this up and running. Here's where we're going to close this together. Here's who needs to be involved in that. All that information is how you're going to get flaky off the table. Okay. So you're going to get that information. If they don't share that information with you, they're flaky. They're not going to close. Right. So that's a deal that's not going to be a June deal. Right. So this comes into a forecasting methodology that we could talk about separately, but you want to have a structure or a method in your process that we've talked about today where you're going to understand what information needs to be gathered by your sales team to ensure that these deals are in fact real and are going to have a good chance of closing. And so that comes down to the information that the prospect is willing to provide you, and that they're real about the project, and that they're going to, work with you to make that happen.
And to that point,
does that help answer? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mo.
Yeah. So if they're not real, I think, actually, I think Anthony just followed up and said, if they are not real, right? If they're not real, I think the objective here is really to disqualify fast, right? The whole point is, do not put the calories into something that you are not certain has a path to closing for you, right? If they, like in most businesses, there's like a standard set of things that, like if this customer exhibits A, B, and C, right, they're ready to buy now, right? If they only exhibit A and B, they're ready to buy. Maybe it's just not right in this cycle. And then if they don't exhibit A or B, they're not ready to buy at all and may never be, right?
Yeah.
One of the common mistakes that I see with like with younger companies is that they tend to go along for the dance, right? With every single customer that comes, prospective customer that comes along, right? But keeping in mind that even those conversations are economic transactions in and of themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
The same way that you're looking for something from us, right? We need to be sure that, we can also get what we need out of you, right? So I'll give you a proposal if you give me a path for this to close out. Is fun. Yeah. And if that's not the case, then I would say rule them out of your pipeline and wait until there is more of a vision around that.
Yep. Yeah, it just comes back to fit. Yeah, it's a great question, Anthony. And I think early and often you need to know who your customer is and really deeply think about that, who you can serve best, whether they're in a certain country, they're a certain size, whatever those dynamics are, ideal customer profile, many call it. Know what that is and be willing to say no. It's hard depending on where you are, but if you can stay true to that, it's really going to help you out. You're going to have a much cleaner pipeline and you're going to have more efficiency and everything will run more smoothly. But yeah, it's a great question.
So before we wrap up, just one last call if anyone else has any questions for Chad or Mo. Okay, so thank you both very much for joining us today to talk about revenue operations. Really appreciate your time. And as I mentioned at the onset of this call, this recording will be available in about 2 weeks' time at communitech.ca if you search our text talk page, and you'll be able to refer back to it. And we will send you a follow-up email this afternoon with today's deck and the resources that Chad and Mo mentioned this afternoon. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Chad and Mo, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.